My name is Gemma Ortiz, and the night my parents told me I was the biggest mistake of their lives was the same night I learned what it meant to be completely alone. 14 years later, I was sitting in my own design studio in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, walls covered in client mock-ups, awards framed neatly behind my desk when my phone rang. The caller ID showed two names I hadn't seen together in over a decade. Mom, Dad. My hands froze above the keyboard. Because when people who abandon you as a child suddenly remember your number, it's never to ask how you're doing. I didn't answer. Not at first. I just stared at the phone while my chest tightened, memories crashing into me without warning, dragging me back to a dinner table in Trenton, New Jersey, where everything first broke. I was 15 years old. It was a normal suburban house. Beige walls. A dining table we'd owned forever. Plates of half-eaten food, still warm. My father, Lance, didn't raise his voice when he said it. He looked straight at me and said, "Having you was the biggest mistake we ever made." My mother, Zelda, didn't even flinch. She added calmly, "And from now on, we're not paying for anything. School, food, clothes, nothing. You're on your own." No shouting, no argument, just finality. I remember thinking there had to be a punchline, some twisted attempt at discipline. But then my father stood up, pushed his chair in, and said, "Pack your things, you're leaving tonight." I walked out of that house with one backpack. That was it. No car, no money, no plan. Just a 15-year-old girl standing on a dark New Jersey sidewalk, trying not to cry because crying felt like weakness, and weakness wasn't going to keep me alive. It started raining not long after. A steady, cold drizzle that soaked through my hoodie as I walked aimlessly. Streets I'd known my entire life suddenly feeling unfamiliar. I didn't know where to go. So I found a payphone outside a closed deli and called the only person I trusted. My best friend, Summer Gutierrez. My voice cracked halfway through explaining. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come here, now. Stay as long as you need." For 3 days, I slept on Summer's couch. I borrowed her clothes, shared whatever food her family could spare, pretended I wasn't terrified that this would be my life forever. Her parents were kind, but I could feel it. This wasn't sustainable. They had their own bills, their own kids, their own limits. Every night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd end up in a shelter. Or worse, back at my parents' door, begging. Then, on the fourth morning, everything changed. There was a knock, verm, urgent. Summer opened the door and gasped. Standing there was my grandmother, Ivory Ortiz. She'd driven through the night after hearing what happened. She didn't say much. She just wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You're safe now." She took me home with her to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That drive felt like crossing into a different life. Ivory didn't have much. A modest house near the Susquehanna River. A retirement income. She stretched carefully. But she gave me something my parents never did. Stability. She enrolled me in school. Paid fees without complaint. Sat with me every night while I did homework at her kitchen table. When she saw my sketchbooks, she said, "You have talent, Gemma. Real talent. Don't waste it." That belief changed everything. Years passed. I graduated, went to Penn State, Harrisburg, started freelancing. One client became two. Two became 10. Eventually, I rented a small office downtown, then a bigger one. By the time I was 29, my studio had landed major contracts, even made local news. That was when my parents called. 14 years of silence, broken only when success became visible. And that call was just the beginning. Because what they wanted next would turn into the most brutal battle of my life. I didn't call my parents back that day. I told myself I needed time to breathe, to think, but deep down, I already knew something was wrong. People don't disappear for 14 years and suddenly reappear because they miss you. They reappear when they want something. 2 weeks later, I found out exactly what that something was. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, mixed in with invoices and design proofs on my desk. Cream-colored paper, formal letterhead. a return address from a small law firm in Trenton, New Jersey. I knew before opening it, my hands shook anyway. Inside was a civil complaint filed in Mercer County Superior Court. My parents were suing me, not for custody, not for defamation, for money. They were demanding reimbursement for what they called 15 years of essential child-rearing expenses. I read the document 3 times, my stomach dropping lower with every page. They had itemized everything: school supplies, groceries, clothes, utilities, even housing costs. They had calculated how much it cost to raise me before they kicked me out at 15. The total? Arshaluan Mayuan. They claimed I owed them every cent now that I was financially successful. It felt unreal, like my childhood had been turned into a receipt. The complaint framed their actions as sacrifice. They portrayed themselves as hardworking parents who invested heavily in me, parents who deserved to be compensated now that their investment had paid off. There was no mention of the night they told me I was a mistake. No mention of the rain, the backpack, the couch, the years of silence. Just numbers. I sat there in my studio, staring at the papers, trying not to throw up. After everything, this was how they chose to re-enter my life. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Ursula Flores, and she practiced in Harrisburg. Her office overlooked the Capital District, clean and professional, exactly what I needed to keep from falling apart. She read the complaint carefully, 1 page at a time, her expression calm but focused. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "Gemma, this lawsuit is weak." That word alone made me breathe again. She explained it plainly. Parents cannot retroactively charge their children for basic upbringing costs, especially when they voluntarily cut off support. Statutes of limitation alone knocked out most of their claims. The rest? Emotion, entitlement, and desperation. Still, she warned me, that doesn't mean they won't try to hurt you. They did. Immediately. The email started first. Long messages sent late at night, half nostalgic, half threatening. They talked about family sacrifices, about everything we did for you, about how unfair it was that I was thriving while they struggled. They suggested mediation. "If we settle this privately," my mother wrote, "maybe we can heal as a family." Ursula told me not to respond. "Let them hang themselves with documentation," she said. So I forwarded everything to her. Every message, every voicemail. Then they escalated. One morning, I pulled into the studio parking lot and saw them standing outside the building. My parents, arms crossed, watching. They didn't approach me, didn't speak to my employees. They just stood there, long enough to be seen. That night, I received an email with photos attached. Photos of my studio, my car, my sign. The message said, "We came all this way, you couldn't even talk to us?" My hands were shaking again, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was anger. The next week, 2 of my long-term clients called me. Both said the same thing. "Your parents contacted us." They hadn't said anything overtly damaging, but they'd hinted about legal disputes, about family obligations, about how success had changed me. Both clients reassured me they trusted me. But the damage? It was done. They weren't trying to reconnect. They were trying to pressure me. Ursula recommended documenting everything and upgrading security. I installed cameras around the studio, changed phone protocols, alerted my team without oversharing. This wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. It was harassment. And for the first time since I was 15, I felt that old fear creeping back, the fear of being cornered by the people who were supposed to protect me. One night, exhausted and emotionally raw, I opened a box I'd kept sealed for years. My grandmother's box. Ivory had passed away a few years earlier, and I hadn't been ready to go through her things. But now, I needed grounding. Inside were tuition receipts, bank statements, letters she'd written me during college, every semester, every expense paid by her, not them. She had quietly built the bridge they were now claiming credit for. I scanned everything, organized it, sent it to Ursula the next morning. Her response was immediate. "This changes everything," she wrote. The case was no longer just defensible. It was strong, but my parents didn't know that yet. And as the court date approached, they made one final move. One that pushed me past the point of patience and straight into resolve. The court date came faster than I expected. November in New Jersey is cold in a way that seeps into your bones, and as I drove back toward Trenton, rain streaked across the windshield like it was trying to wash the past back onto me. I hadn't been back in 14 years. Not once. And now I was returning not as a scared 15-year-old with a backpack, but as a woman walking into a courtroom with her own lawyer, her own evidence, and her own voice. That alone felt surreal. The Mercer County Courthouse looked exactly the same. Gray stone, heavy doors, fluorescent lights that made everything feel harsher than it needed to be. I arrived early, meeting Ursula in the lobby. She reviewed our notes calmly, flipping through a neatly organized binder that contained my entire life since the night I left home. Leases, tax returns, bank statements, affidavits, proof that I had survived and succeeded without them. When we entered the courtroom, I saw my parents sitting at the plaintiff's table. They didn't look at me, not once. They sat close together, whispering to their attorney, faces stiff and unreadable. No anger, no guilt, just calculation. We took our seats across the aisle. The distance between us felt bigger than the courtroom itself. The judge entered a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a measured presence. She called the case. My parents' attorney stood first. He spoke about sacrifice, about years of dedication, about parents who did their best. He held up enlarged copies of old receipts, school uniforms, dental bills, extracurricular activities, as if they were trophies. My father testified next. He talked about overtime shifts, missed vacations, tight budgets. My mother followed, describing packed lunches, homework help, driving me to school. Listening to them was disorienting, because none of it was false, but it was incomplete, and that was the point. When it was our turn, Ursula stood. Her voice was calm, precise. She didn't argue emotion. She argued facts. She established timelines, confirmed under oath that my parents had provided zero financial or emotional support after the age of 15. No phone calls, no birthday cards, no emergency help, nothing. Then she introduced our evidence. My grandmother's tuition payments every semester, my early tax returns from part-time jobs, apartment leases signed solely in my name, bank records showing independent income from age 22 onward. The judge leaned forward, asked questions, clarifying dates, reviewing documents, and then Ursula said the words that shifted the room. Your Honor, this case is not about parenting. It's about entitlement. The plaintiffs voluntarily ended their parental role. They cannot now invoice adulthood. Silence followed. My parents' attorney attempted a rebuttal. He asked the court to consider equity, to suggest a reduced settlement. The judge didn't hesitate. She ruled from the bench. The complaint was dismissed with prejudice. No refiling. No negotiation. And then she went further. Citing lack of legal basis and undue burden, she ordered my parents to pay my legal fees and court costs, approximately $38,000. I didn't breathe until the gavel fell. My parents stood up slowly. They didn't look at me. They gathered their papers and walked out without saying a word. 14 years of silence ending exactly the way it had begun. Cold, final, self-inflicted. Ursula turned to me and nodded. "It's over," she said. And for the first time since I was 15, I believed it. Driving back to Harrisburg felt different. The rain had stopped. The road was clear. Messages from my partner, Yates, buzzed my phone, short, joyful, grounding. "Dinner's on me tonight. You did it." At the studio, my team had held everything together without me. Deadlines met, clients reassured, momentum intact. Life hadn't paused while I faced my past, and that felt like the real victory. But consequences don't end in courtrooms. They unfold quietly, and over time, my parents paid a price they hadn't expected. The consequences didn't come all at once. They never do. They came quietly, over months, then years, unavoidable and irreversible. Covering the court-ordered payment forced my parents to sell their house in Trenton. It was the home they'd lived in for decades, the one they'd always treated as proof of stability and authority. The market wasn't kind, and after settling debts and legal fees, what remained barely covered a small apartment in a nearby suburb. They downsized more than their space. They downsized their world. People noticed. Former neighbors stopped calling. Longtime friends kept their distance. Invitations quietly disappeared. When word spread about the lawsuit, the ruling, the reason they became a story no one wanted to be part of, not out of cruelty, but discomfort. People don't like entitlement when it's exposed. My parents settled into routines that reflected their choices. Grocery trips, television evenings, short walks in silence. The kind of life shaped not by hardship, but by isolation. I didn't celebrate it, but I didn't feel guilty either. My life, on the other hand, kept expanding. The studio outgrew its space, and we leased the adjacent office to create collaborative areas for brainstorming and client presentations. New contracts came in, tech startups, hospitality brands, nonprofit organizations that wanted their stories told with care and integrity. I hired more women. Talented, overworked, underestimated. I made sure they were paid fairly, credited openly, and never made to feel disposable. Because I knew exactly what that felt like. Outside of work, my relationship with Yates deepened naturally. No pressure. No rescue fantasies. Just partnership. We spent weekends exploring small towns, cooking together, building a life that felt chosen, not inherited. His presence didn't fill a void. It complemented the independence I'd worked so hard to build. That mattered more than romance ever could. Sometimes I think about Ivory. My grandmother never got to see the courtroom or the ruling, but her legacy was present in every document, every truth spoken aloud. She didn't save me with grand gestures. She saved me with consistency, with showing up, with believing that a scared 15-year-old girl deserved a future, even when her parents said otherwise. That kind of love changes trajectories. Cutting ties with toxic family isn't dramatic in real life. It's quiet. It's choosing peace over permission, boundaries over guilt, self-respect over history. Success didn't come because I proved them wrong. It came because I stopped trying to prove anything at all. If you're watching this and you feel overworked, unseen, or used by people who only value you when it benefits them, hear this clearly. You don't owe access to anyone who abandoned your well-being. You don't need validation from those who withheld support. And protecting your peace is not selfish, it's necessary. Build the life that sustains you. Let go of the people who don't. Everything changes when you do. And sometimes, that's the moment life finally starts.